What's happening, fandoms? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we react to music videos and shows. Today, I'm going back to that new Rockstars Love, where they're doing an episode 3 and 4 breakdown, Easter eggs for the Rings of Power, episodes 3 and 4. If you're not already a fan of new Rockstars, they do amazing pop culture content. They review and break down all of the best shows. Eric Voss is my favorite. He's their main guy. Let's see what he has to tell us about the world of the Lord of the Rings today.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Episode 3 and Episode 4. I'm doing my best to keep up with this series, but you know, with the D23 news, House of the Dragon, She-Hulk, and daily blood sacrifices to Jake the Talking Goat, fitting in Jeff Bezos' flex has been tough. But I love this series so much, and there's so many details to appreciate, so I'm gonna go through some really cool stuff that was pretty easy to miss from Episode 3, and then dive deep into Episode 4. First, some more things to say about this beautiful opening title sequence. Creative director Anthony Vitagliano confirmed that the look was inspired by Chaldini figures, wherein sand is vibrated by sound to show different wavelengths, a phenomenon called cymatics. Plains of Yonder, the production company that made these, explained that this is all meant to show Tolkien's Ainur, the angelic spirits whose songs literally constructed this world of Arda. So when we see these sands forming the two trees of Valinor, we are literally seeing the creation myth of this world, with Howard Shore's score as the songs of the Ainur, until his darker horn section snakes in to represent the invasive evil of Morgoth and Sauron. Now, for episode 3, let's take it storyline by storyline, starting with Arondir. Arondir is dragged into this nightmare that the orcs have been digging under the Southlands the whole time, turning this into what we now know will be the future Mordor. Actually, back in episode 1, the Ostirith watchtower overlooking the Southlands lines up perfectly with a lone distant peak, a volcano, a likely candidate for Mount Doom. Notice how the opening shot shows him taking in these sunlight blocking tarps overhead, little beams of light annoying the orcs, and hearing them bickering about who gets sunlight duty. You can see him gradually forming this plan to just slice that tarp open to expose them all to sunlight later on in the episode. Now, as we revisit the storyline later in the episode, the map crossfades from a tree into the live action tree, which these elf diggers put up a stand to protect, because trees are hugely significant to elves and to Tolkien. Look no further than the Ents, of course. These elves are scarred with what happened to their ancestors with the trees of Valinor. When his friend gets killed, Arondir sadly tells it, which in Quenya translates to forgive me. Now later, Miriel talks about the white tree being descended from the Valar, pieces of the trees of Valinor, and actually the seeds of this tree will later be carried to Middle-earth by Isildur to plant the white tree in Gondor that we see in Minas Tirith. In Peter Jackson's Return of the King, that tree starts off dead and then starts to blossom again when Aragorn returns, but in Tolkien's writing, Aragorn physically replants his sapling. Tolkien fucking loves trees. Back in the ditch, Revion speculates about Adar.
Sauron was said to have many names in days of old. Perhaps this is one of them. There's more at work here than we can yet see.
Yeah, notice how the first part of that line looked like it was ADR that was added in post-production, because we don't see the actor's face on screen when he says it. The audio sounds slightly different, suggesting that this is a very important line. The producers of this episode needed to be in there to set up something else. The closing shot teases Adar, who is played by Joseph Mall, Benjen Stark from Game of Thrones. He himself is not Sauron, most likely. His name translates to father because this is the name that the orcs that he birthed gave him, and he is more likely a minion of Sauron or someone working alongside Sauron towards the same objective. Now in the Galadriel Numenor storyline, Galadriel awakens in the ship immediately, reaches for Finrod's dagger at her side, and it's not there. Halbrand, always super observant, notices that, how desperate she is to get it back, how fearful she is to not have it, and how he can prove himself indispensable to her by quelling that fear. Notice how later we see him eyeing that dagger at Elendil's side, and when he hugs Elendil in the throne room, he totally swipes it off him, and right after, you can see that dagger gone from Elendil's side, and you can make out Halbrand holding it flush against his arm as they walk up the steps. He does a similar kind of sleight of hand with the guild pen later on. But anyway, we meet Elendil this episode, a captain of Numenor. Numenor is a star-shaped island kingdom between Middle-earth and Valinor. Numenor was given to the humans by the Valar, the gods of this world, for siding with elves against Morgoth in the previous age, and as a result, Numenorian humans live extended lives, but not as long as the lives of elves. Towering over this harbor is a statue of Earendil, father to Elrond and his twin brother Elros. Elros, whom we see on the tapestry later on. Notice how this statue's hand is outstretched welcoming, a contrast to the future statues of the Argonath in Middle-earth. Those actually will depict an older version of Isildur and his brother Anarion, Elendil's sons. Now, we have not met Anarion yet, but the show does add a new character, their sister, Aarion. The Aarondil statue has a Cimmerillion jewel on its crown and a bird beside him that represents Elrond and Elros's mother, Elwing, who did take bird form at one point. And notice the way the statue gazes out is exactly how Celebrimbor describes him later in episode 4.
He had that way of seeing far off.
Elrond actually speaks about Arendelle later.
My father single-handedly sailed to
Arendelle the
and
Mariner.
convinced the Valar to join the war and vanquish Morgoth. So great were his deeds that the Valar lifted him beyond the bounds of this world to forever carry the evening star across the sky.
A legend that even the Harfoots like Sudok know about.
Prepare to beings who had turned into stars. Never the other way round.
Now, the starlight of Arendelle is what Galadriel will later give to Frodo in the Fellowship of the Ring.
I give you the
The
light
Phial of
our
Galadriel.
most beloved star. May it be a light for you in dark places when all other lights go out.
Now, as they walk through the kingdom, Halbrand's eyes light up when he passes the forge, where the fire rages, and he later begs the blacksmith to let him work there.
I'm telling you, there is not another man on this isle that knows this craft better than I.
Halbrand even gets into a huge fight just to try to get a guild pin so he can work in this forge. I think the clues are very clearly pointing to Halbrand secretly being our Sauron, ladies and gentlemen. His interest in forging, his skill at winning people over,
Really?
but his secretly violent nature checks all the boxes of what we should expect from a master of deceit who's going to fool all these characters at some point. We're basically looking for an antichrist, and I think we got one here. Notice how even when the
Wow.
guys ask his name, he cryptically says,
Depends. Depends on what. How close we are.
which absolutely recalls Revion's line earlier about Sauron's many
Wow,
names.
I
But they
would
greet the
not
queen
have
reaches Miriel.
suspected him.
No one kneels in Numenor.
Sorry.
Well, the future heir of Elendil and Isildur, and the whole Numenorian lineage of men through Gondor, Aragorn will of course say something very similar.
You bow to no one.
Now notice Farazón's tunic is covered with the guild pins that the smiths only have one of, showing that he has mastered a number of crafts and areas of civic responsibility. Now on the deck of the ship, Isildur hears a female voice.
Please.
This happens again, of course, in episode 4, getting Isildur kicked off of the crew. Isildur is looking off beyond the western shores of Numenor toward Valinor because he thinks this is the voice of his mother. And I think we are getting a hint of the voice that the One Ring will speak to him in when it corrupts him in Mount Doom. Now, Peter Jackson's films framed Isildur's corruption through Galadriel and Elrond's recounting of it, but in truth, it wasn't just pure evil that caused him to say no, take the ring. He initially just took that ring as a token of the family that he had lost in this battle. So I think we're seeing how this series is going to redeem the character of Isildur. It's not that he was evil, it's just that he was weakened by things that all men are weakened by. And I like how in these episodes we get an interesting contrast. Isildur helps pull Imrahil back on the boat, whereas back in episode 2, Halbrand immediately pried his part of the raft away from the others to save himself and doom all of them to death. Miriel gives Elendil this sword, which at first I thought could be the Narsil sword, you know, the one that shatters and is used by his son Isildur to cut the ring off Sauron's hand. But actually, Narsil totally does show up later in episode 4, the room with the Palantir, along with the axe and a swan-decorated shield of Tuor. I love a good room built with Easter eggs. Elendil speaks
Wow,
Quenya
that was
to
a lot.
Galadriel.
Where I was raised, many speak it. It is still taught in our Hall of Law, still carved on statues throughout the city, if you look closely enough.
And he points to an elf statue covered by ungroomed vines. Indeed, throughout Numenor, the elvish iconography has been buried over time. And in episode 4, Eärien and Isildur meet in front of a mural depicting elves and men working together to fight off a sea creature, but that paint has been left to peel away. Galadriel connects Sauron's sigil with a map of the Southlands, and she reads this black speech plan to create Mordor. This text is written in a ring around the symbol, like a certain elvish warning inscribed in the One Ring in Lord of the Rings. Now, Elendil tells his son Isildur,
The watery part of this world has a way of healing even the deepest of wounds.
interesting word choice for these seafarers who chant the phrase, the sea is always right. Why not say to your son, the sea will heal your wounds, instead of the watery part of this world? Well, I think it's a nod to Isildur's fate. He will drown in a river at the end of his life, a river being a general watery part of the world. And when the One Ring parts from him in that moment, in a way, it does heal his wounds of the burden that was on him. Then on to the Harfoots of this episode. Poor Margot's injured foot is not really healed, and he tells his wife Marigold,
You know, after I lost Rose, it was like the wheels broke out
Come under me.
I just like how in all these scenes the Harfoots revolve all of their references to things like wheels and the path, because that is their entire cultural identity.
Yeah,
now the
they are
Harfoots
totally
memorialize
nomadic.
those they had lost on the past year's migration, having a chant of their own, "We wait for you." And this includes Poppy's entire family that was lost in a landslide. My God. But then they all freaking laugh at a Harfoot who died from bees? Bees?
Bees?
Not the bears!
Have you not seen My Girl? This guy is dead, you But then our poor giant meteor man goes fire bad and burns the star map and bulldozes through their camp. So Sadok moves the Brandyfoots to the back of the caravan, which is essentially a death sentence. But you know, if you think about it, someone always has to be at the back of the line. So whoever that current caboose must be like, oh, Randy Wiggletoes is moving up. Guess me shitting in the wrong tent wasn't the worst thing that happened to us, eh, Harfoots? But the stranger helps them keep moving. Friend. I can't help but see this as another Gandalf clue. Because remember that moment in Fellowship?
What's the Elvish word for friend?
Bella.
Oh, and by the way, those doors of Durin, totally designed for the dwarves by our man Celebrimbor. Thus his fascination last episode with that dwarven technology. Episode 4 opens with Muriel's disastrous vision of Numenor being swallowed by the sea. The petals of the white tree cry those tears of the Valar. Their judgment and wrath sinking this kingdom. The pointed balcony crumbles. And if this architecture reminds you of Minas Tirith, that is by design. That city will get established by this branch of humans in a later age. This episode is titled The Great Wave, and this is the same wave of Numenor referenced by Faramir in Tolkien's Return of the King. Tolkien himself wrote in letters to readers that he was haunted by a recurring nightmare of a wave towering over the Green Inlands. So here, Muriel is seeing Tolkien's nightmare come to life. But then when we cut to Muriel awakening, she's not waking up from a dream. She's already kind of sitting up, her eyes open. That's because this is not a dream. It was a vision from the Palantir Scene Stone. Adar introduces himself to Arondir as a fellow Sylvan elf from Beleriand, the sunken landmass from the War of Wrath, which may inform why Adar is so motivated to help build a new kingdom in the Southlands. We learn that Bronwyn and the others have fled to that watchtower, reminding us of the refugees in Helm's Deep, but they're running out of food, so Theo and Southwarsk and Rowan go back for food. Theo tries to stay in the late when he packs up that food in that house, but the door behind him closes, trapping him in the darkness. He's able to repel the orc with his broken sword, using his own blood to let it grow. Notice how he slices off that orc's fingers with the incomplete blade, another possible nod to Narsil, which of course will do this to Sauron's hand. In Lindon, dwarves and elves collaborate to construct Celebrimbor's forge tower. I love how you can see down there the elves standing beside the shorter dwarves. Every wide shot of this show is just so intricately designed and beautiful, including the look of these cranes. Notice how they have a specific spiral design to them. This actually lines up perfectly with the proportions of the golden ratio, just giving you a sense of how genius of engineers these dwarves are. Another thing I love about this series is how expertly it employs light and darkness in the storytelling. Like in this scene when Elrond visits Khazad-dûm to investigate Durin, Durin leans in close to his wife Diza.
We're making good progress in the old mine.
In that moment, the mirrored light beams of Moria revealed the truth of their deception. And if you remember, Diza told her kids to chant a different poem than Rich Crone, Kiss a Stone, Polish Your Gems and Gold, because that is the secret password for the old mine. Now, this Maskdorf guard asks Elrond if he's lost. This is actually actor Dave Chapman, who performs and voices B2EMO in Star Wars Andor. Just want to shout this guy out because I love what he's doing in that series. Durin reveals to Elrond that they have been mining Mithril, the ore that of course will be used in the chainmail that Bilbo later gives Frodo. But Durin lets Elrond keep this big chunk of Mithril, which might be the same Mithril that Celebrimbor will later use to forge Nenya, the Mithril ring that Galadriel wears. And of course, whenever you try to ask her about it, she's always like, Nenya business, this one's mine. Galadriel and Halbrand end up sharing neighboring cells in Numenor's dungeon, a room with a huge statue of the sea goddess, meaning that this was not always a dungeon. It's a repurposed room with a previous function. The fact that Numenor needs dungeons at all is not a great sign. Definitely a sign that they aren't doing what the Valar intended, but Halbrand has this fascinating bit of wisdom.
You do well to identify what it is that your opponent most fears.
And exploit it.
No. Give them a means of mastering it, so that you can master them.
I mean, come on, Sauron, at least try to hide it a bit better, because of course Sauron will successfully trick men and elves and dwarves into forging 19 rings, mastering their fears, all so that he could master them with his one ring of power. Muriel unveils to Galadriel the Palantir, one of the 7 Seeing Stones made by the Noldor and Valinor, believed to be made by Feanor himself. Of course, another one of these is used by Saruman in Lord of the Rings. I just love the visual detail of the Palantir cracking and shattering outward and then framing Galadriel inside of those cracks, as if to show show how these visions are essentially cracking and shattering one's hopes for the future with a prophecy of doom. Arondir saves Theo, who honestly I would have left in the well, but they're saved by sunlight. And as the sun rises over the mountains, we realize the female singing voice we've been hearing is that of Diza resonating to communicate with the mountain, like she talked about in episode 2. And I love it. The way these grains vibrate on the stone matches perfectly with the opening credits imagery. There was the Einar creating Arda. Here it is a similar process of angelic music moving the grains of the earth. Now, Waldreg reveals to Theo that he knew that he stole the hilt and shows him a scar where he had been using his blood to keep it alive all this time. The fact these people have needed their blood to feed it suggests that without a human host, it would have died out. All it takes is one spark of a believer to keep the evil alive. But Waldreg tells Theo that he interpreted the meteor as a sign of Sauron's coming return. But you know, what does Waldreg know, really? But in a way, that could still be true about the meteor, that the Valar still sent this stranger, but rather than a sign of doom, a sign of concern, a bit of help to face that doom. Because yes, I am still assuming that this is an Istari Gandalf sent as a defense against the rings and against Sauron. Meanwhile, I'm still speculating that Theo is going to end up becoming one of the Nazgul. If anything, it's happening too fast. Like, slow down, kid. Save some of that blood to surrender to Sauron in season 3. And as Miriel sends Galadriel away, those white tree petals just sob everywhere, which she reads as a signal that parting ways with Galadriel is a huge mistake. So she decides to give Galadriel an army. But is this the right move? I mean, it's impossible to know. Like Galadriel and Miriel, we, the viewers, know the eventual fate of all these characters, how they're going to be fooled by Sauron and fail each other. Yet this show asks us to be led by faith and not by fear, because in this series there will be moments of triumph as well. It's only a passing thing, the shadow. Even darkness must pass, but a new day will come, and when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those are the stories that stay with you, that meant something. Folks in those stories had lost their chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something, that there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. Yeah, I'll take every excuse to force those immortal words in every conversation, because this world is too dark and we all need to hear it as much as possible. And I'm gonna do my best to keep fighting for the good of keeping up with this series. Thank you for your patience. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter at EAVOS. Follow New Rockstars, subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Man, so many details, and holy moly, I did not think to suspect that Halbrand might be Sauron. Wow, and I definitely didn't think Adar was Sauron, but man, if Halbrand is Sauron, wow, that changes a lot of things. And man, the little clues that he pointed out about that may very well be true. That seems very plausible. Wow. Yeah, that's gonna paint everything in a brand new light for me. I mean, Eric's not always right. He famously predicted that Mephisto would be the big bad guy in WandaVision, hence the Mephisto confirmed meme. That came from Eric from New Rockstars. But those are some very good details and some very good facts, tying in all of the lore, all of the known facts, and even, I don't know where they found this, but even correspondence from the author to his readers about his dreams of the Great Wave. I had no idea that was the case. That is some crazy stuff. So, wow, lots to think about, and I now cannot wait for the next episode to come around so we can advance this plot a little bit more. My goodness. Thanks for sticking with us and watching through the Rings of Power show with us. It is so much fun. The world is beautiful, and it's such a shame that we know that many of these people are literally, like he said, going to be fooled by Sauron and killed. We do know that Galadriel survives because she plays a major role in the movies that have already occurred, which happen after this. So, but most of the rest of these people have no chance. So, but man, it is a beautiful world with so much. It's just soaked in lore and soaked in grandness and marvel, and I'm appreciating it a great deal. And thank you guys so much, and see you in the next video.